Hello there, everyone. The title says it all. I'm chatting with Steve Shives, Christy Winters, and Chrisiousity. Apologies to Chrissy for not inviting her straight away. Otherwise, I would have had some sort of funny line for her intro. But yeah, Christy Winters, the siren of psephology, the titan of Teutonic tutelage herself. Hello there, Christy.
Hey, how you doing?
And Steve Shives, the man whose existence on the internet shows that some atheists don't know the meaning of the word destruction.
Hello, Kevin. Hello, everybody. Good to be here.
And Chrisiousity, the Wonder Woman who's wondering why I didn't come up with a funny line for her. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, so we're talking about the Women's March. So we've got two men on to talk about that. That's good. Yeah, so the three other people attended. So why don't you tell us all about the day and what you thought of it?
I think
Who would you like to start? Yeah. I think we should go alphabetically. So CC starts with a C, whereas I start with a K. So,
well, it was just a very life-affirming, warm thing to be witness to and to be at. It was beautiful. There were so many people. And I have been to. First of all, I went also to the inauguration as well. So. Anybody who wants to, well, I went there as protest, but even that was sort of just a useless thing. So
So Cece, you were part of the 1,000 million strong crowd that were definitely there for the inauguration, yeah?
If they were there, they were hiding very, very
invisibility
well.
cloaks. Invisibility cloaks.
Well, you couldn't see against the white background because some of them were wearing bed sheets.
The turnout was so sparse that in that overhead picture you can probably pick out which dot is Chris.
You'll be like, hi.
Yeah, probably circle her. Hey, there you are.
Yeah, it was. I mean, there really is. Anybody who tries to tell you that the media is lying and there were tons and tons of people has no idea what they're talking about. They're just full of shit. But the Women's March, yeah, that was. I mean, it took hours just to get into the city through the metro. And it was just so, people were so happy. And there was a really loving vibe from everyone. There was a really friendly people talking and going out of their way to be helpful to each other, even though, we're all mobbed in and like a mosh pit of people, only much, much bigger. So it was really, and it really, it got me to thinking a lot about some of the things that we talk about here on YouTube and how they really play out in reality. Sometimes you get so into talking about different rights of certain people or group marginalization, and you're talking about it as if it's an abstract thing, but to see all these different and diverse people in front of you coming together to sort of have one statement, it's just a very profound thing to really see that it isn't an abstract. These are real people with real passion and goals and families and because it was very family. I felt like there was a lot of multi-generational groups, clearly little kids, husbands, wives, people who are daughters, mothers, grandmothers, all together. So it was really cool. It was really a great experience.
Yeah, that's the feeling I got, and I think it was summed up in the little video, one of the little video clips that Steve and Christy put out about from the low point of having the orange fascist prick inaugurated the day before, that this was a real pick-me-up for a lot of people in America.
Yeah.
So yeah, Chris, unless you've got anything else to add, CC.
Nope, I'm good.
Okay, well, I'll allow the other two guests to speak as they spent the day together.
Yeah. Well, first, I think one thing that's not been said enough is hats off to the DC police and the protest march organizers for coping and scrambling and adapting to basically double the crowds that they had anticipated. I know that a lot of people had to wait to use the metro. I know that they laid on a lot of lines, but that movement of all of the people into town seemed to be flowing, even though people had to wait. It was steady. It was constant, and people were constantly getting to where the march was being held. And then when they realized how large the march was, they were able to send us off multiple streets rather than just the one, because there were too many of us to go down the planned march route. And so that really made the day. I mean, having it so well organized, having the portaloos, having the sound systems set up, and that was all. I mean, for a march, in the moment, it was really, really good. And the entertainment, I think, went on a little too long because people came there to march, not necessarily listen to speeches for as long as they did. But for those who wanted to stay for the full 5-hour program, they could do that. And I guess a lot of people did. Steve and I cut out after about 4 hours because they'd run an hour over, and everyone around us was kind of ready to march. But it's only so long you can stand before your feet start to go a bit numb and your knees get achy. Even, I'm sure for young people too, and I'm more middle-aged. But, reflecting on the march, the psychological effect, I think, was the most profound. It was the difference between how I felt every day since the election up until the march, and seeing all the people and the energy. And, there was a lot of joking, and there was a lot of tweaks and humor, but there were a lot of sincere pledges. People wrote those handmade signs. They came from the people. That came from people's hearts. So when you look at those signs and you read them if you see the photos, take time to read the signs, because when we were there live, that was what hit us. I mean, at least it hit me the most, was the diversity in the messages, and yet the unity in the values and the directions. And what you didn't have was, burning people in effigy. You didn't have calls to, harm people or anything like that. So, there was a positive, nonviolent from everybody. And the thing is, we marched, a lot of us could afford to be there. And I was marching for the people that couldn't afford to be there. Where I came from the other side of the river. I came from where it's predominantly African-American neighborhoods. And there wasn't that much traffic on my side of the river going into town. And that's not to say that there weren't people going. There were lots of people going, but I didn't have to face the kind of massive rallies. And I'm wondering the extent to which, people were working on that Saturday and didn't have time to go to the rally because they've got to feed their families. So that was one of the things that kind of occurred to me, while I was at the march and afterwards. And then the other thing too is that the march itself wasn't the ending point. The march itself wasn't the goal. The march was the starting point. So we went to the march, we got the energy, we recognized that. I love that phrase that Steve used in his video, that there is unity through our diversity. And when we look around, we all realize we are aiming for the same things. We have different emphases, and we have different things that we care about for our own selves, but we understand each other's issues. So I'm not a massive environmentalist, but I see my environmentalist allies and I get where they're coming from, and I'm willing to support them. And the same goes for a lot of the issues that was around migrant issues and, for issues of women of color, I need to be a good ally. So for me, the march was really the start. It wasn't the end. Getting here and doing the march wasn't the end of my journey. It's the start of it. And now we have to think about how do we translate this energy and positivity into action, not only in our own lives, for contacting our representatives, but inspiring other people around us to join. Give them the infectious enthusiasm that we captured in that moment. And we need to take that home in a bottle, and we need to pass it on, because other people who weren't there, they might have seen it and been inspired, but it might fade a little bit faster, or you need to share your enthusiasm with them to lift them up, because they might still be in that post-election funk. So for me, the most important thing that came out of it was a lot of the themes that Steve talked about. You're not alone, and we are not isolated. We're not the minority. If we unite and join forces and be consistent in our application of political pressure, that will ultimately make the change.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, a shout out in terms of organisation, obviously to the people in DC, but to marches across not just the country, because there was like 7.75 million in LA. I mean, that's fucking huge. There were 30 in the Antarctic, for fuck's sake. 30 women marched in the Antarctic. That's
Protest on
mainly
every
penguins and
continent.
ice. Absolutely. Well, there were 100,000 in London. You can't get that for something that's actually happening here for 100,000 people to turn out, including, of course, we had Peter Capaldi and Ian McKellen. So you had Doctor Who and Gandalf. For fuck's sake, that's pretty good. And not just that, but given that when he returns from the dead, he's Gandalf the White, so you'd assume that therefore he'd be a Trump supporter, but apparently not. Anyway, silly jokes aside, Steve, any thoughts?
Yeah, I want to pick up first on something that Chrisiousity said about how many families were there. I remember one of the great images I have of being there that I didn't mention in my video was from where Christy and I were. We were on 7th Avenue, right in front of the Air and Space Museum, which is like my favorite place in the world. And this is like 4 times in a row I've been to DC and I haven't visited the Air and Space Museum. So next time I'm in DC, I'm visiting the Air and Space Museum. God damn it. But on the other side of 7th Avenue from the Air and Space Museum is the Hirshhorn Museum. And there's a big concrete wall that sort of rings the perimeter of the Hirshhorn Museum. And people were climbing up on that wall and sitting to sort of get above the crowd. And most of them were kids. And I imagine maybe their parents wanted them to get up there so they could have a place to sit so they wouldn't have to stand for hours and hours and hours. But it seemed like every time I glanced over there, there were more kids sitting on that wall. And that just gave me such a thrill and gave me such hope to see how many kids of, from like, probably elementary school age up through adolescence were sitting on that wall, looking at the big screen, watching the speakers, experiencing that crowd, listening to the chants, participating in the chants. And they're going to grow up and remember this for the rest of their lives. I mean, they were a part of something that was one of the largest public demonstrations in the history of this country. And I think if you add up all of the ones that took place in cities all over the world, it's probably the largest single unified demonstration ever. And that just, it made me feel so hopeful and so good to think of all those young people there watching that. And then, yeah, I mean, the vibe in the crowd was amazing. It was so positive. It was so encouraging. And the message I took from it was, we can do this. Like, this is not impossible. This is incredibly possible. This is incredibly within reach. We have our enemies outnumbered. The online spaces that we often engage in have a way of amplifying the toxic voices and amplifying the negative voices and making it feel like if you are a supporter of feminism, if you are a supporter of social justice and racial justice and all of these causes that are so often maligned and mischaracterized and attacked on the internet, you can feel like you're in the minority, like you're outnumbered, like it's hopeless, especially if you're an atheist and you find you notice that so many of the incredibly popular atheist and skeptic channels are of that type, are people who openly scorn feminism and progressivism and push white supremacist talking points and then deny that's what they're doing, and push rape apologetics and then deny that's what they're doing. And they get rewarded and have more and more popularity as a result of this. But standing in those streets with all those people, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, so many people that when we were all bunched up together, you couldn't move. And they were there for a feminist march, and they were there to protest the election of Donald Trump as president. And we were all together, people of all ages, people of all colors, people of all genders. And it just came home to me, like, we've got this. If we stick together, if we actually get up and do it, we can do this. We've got this. So that was the most encouraging thing about it. I mean it without a hint of exaggeration. It was one of the best days of my life. It was so encouraging.
Yeah, I would encourage anyone who's interested to go and watch Steve's video about this, because you could see how moved he was by the whole thing. It was actually really, enlightening viewing, I would suggest. But yeah, I think the point you make is correct, because their version of activism, they get, you know, a few thousand people to sign a petition that goes nowhere. When progressives actually join together and can do some shit, they get 500,000 people out in the nation's capital, and like I say, 750,000 in LA, and nearly 500,000 in Chicago, and 100,000 in London. It's not even the fucking same continent, for Christ's sake. You know, that's an incredible thing. That's what we need to take hope from, if we can actually force them to doing it. And we already have, to a degree, because even before, it was before Trump was inaugurated, wasn't it? They were going to gut the ethics board, and people rang in such huge numbers that they forced them to essentially do the right thing and not gut the people who were there to make sure that they actually do their jobs properly and ethically. For fuck's sake. It's ridiculous. But anyway, yeah. So I mean, where do people see this going in the upcoming, you know, in the near future, or over the next 4 years, however long this fucking train wreck of a presidency goes on for? Because I'm not convinced in the slightest it's going to go the full 4 years. But if it does, do we see this becoming a kind of influential, potentially on the left, as the Tea Party was on the right? Maybe. Thoughts?
Christ, I hope so. I mean, if it's not, then yeah, then it's completely on us. You know what I mean? Like if I said to Christy while we were walking, there's never been a Tea Party rally this big. You know, and the Tea Party was able to basically take over the Republican Party 5 years ago. And if we can't transform, you know, 4 million people worldwide into real progressive political action, then, you know, we kind of deserve what we get. I mean, I think it has to. We have to. There were a few people on stage who said, you know, it's time. We need to start pushing the Democratic Party. We need to start pushing that party and driving that party to be a progressive party, and to resist Trumpism and to be the voice of the people. And I mean, it's obvious that we can do it. You know, Saturday proves we can come together and we can do it. So we just need to do it.
Yeah.
From my perspective.
Sorry,
go ahead, Kevin, then I'll. All right. Well, okay, we'll just keep interrupting each other. How about that? I did.
Yeah, go on. For fuck's sake, one speak.
Delay. Sorry. Yeah, I can actually hear myself a little bit in your background. So I was trained as a grassroots activist when I was at university. And the thing that I think each of us have to do, it depends on kind of where everybody is. So everyone has to decide their level of activism and what they can do. And for some people, it's going to be direct action, calling their federal representatives, their state representatives, their local representatives, hopefully. I think there's a level of where you get involved by taking direct action yourself. And then I think you can take action by helping to organize others, right? You become an expert on an issue that you care about, and then you disseminate information and you give other people the information to call. And then there's the more professional organization where you become active in a party or active in like Planned Parenthood Action Fund or another activist group where you start doing, you know, organized activism, and then there's running for office. So what I hope is that people will decide a level of their own activism and then embrace it. I know for myself, I'm very much, I've already started, you know, with progressive proposals for progressives, trying to highlight progressive issues, and I want to do that more often. The holidays obviously was a little bit difficult, but while I've been here, I've met people on the board of the DC Abortion Fund. It's a group that raises money specifically to help women who don't have the money to afford abortions, to give them money to access abortion. And I want to have those people on my channel and ask about, you know, get more people to understand what they're doing. I want to have an action plan once a month where people can focus on a specific political goal. So for me, it's not enough to just contact my representatives. I feel like I have more of an obligation because I have, well, it's a small channel, but it's a channel that has a small presence, and I have to do what I can with that presence. So from here on out, I think we all have to figure out our level of activism and commit to it, and then be consistent all the way until 2018, 2020, 2022, 2024, and in your local races too.
Yeah, I was just going to say, having sort of briefly alluded to it there, should we mention a donation drive each month thing that you were doing?
Yes. So on my series Proposals for Progressives, I started what's called the Resistance Fund. And what I've done is I've pledged to give 20% of my gross patron donations every month to a progressive cause. So the first month it was the ACLU, that was in November. December got a bit busy, so I'm going to make a unilateral decision to give money to Planned Parenthood. A patron of mine wants to make a donation to PFLAG, so I think January, since we're almost to the end of it, I'll make a donation on his behalf to PFLAG, and then I'm going to be looking at, putting up more progressive funds like the DC Abortion Action, the DC Abortion Fund that my friends work on, or other progressive causes, and just to give a little bit of money. It won't be, I think it's right now, it's about $20, but the point is just to show that every little helps, as it were, which is a Tesco motto for those of you in the UK. But yeah, and so Kevin has, do you want to say what you've committed to as well?
Yeah, I'm going to match dollar for dollar up to a reasonable amount, because I'm not a millionaire, people. But yeah, up to a reasonable amount, I'll match dollar for dollar, whatever that be. So if it's $20 for this month or whatever, so we've got double the amount going to whichever charity, and you can do that by being a patron to Christy. If that's, I know channel's linked below, so go and check her out. And actually check all 3 people out, because they're fucking awesome. Don't watch my stuff; it's rubbish by comparison. But anyway, yeah, and then you can help choose which organisations get the money. And no, we're not going to be giving money to Nazis, so don't try and flood it with that nonsense, people. Anyway, yes. So, Chrissy, any thoughts on where this movement may go from here?
Absolutely. I do think that there is a real energy and awareness. I heard from a lot of people that were talking about the need to sort of invest in their own communities, so that there's sort of more of a pool of talent to reach from, a better system. And I had sort of jokingly said before I went down, that women should just organize all these rallies from now on, because obviously they do an awesome job at it. It's sort of the sorts of things that we're trained to do. And I do think that that is one of the key things that we have over sort of our opposition, who are sort of obsessed with the idea of individualism to a degree which is kind of, absurd to me, as if we aren't 7.5 billion people trying to share a planet. We're just like a bunch of random individuals.
I was going to say, I think it's worth interjecting on those people. A point Steve made in his video, five things. Is it called 5 stupid things anymore? It's not, is it?
No, it's just 5 things, and it's a different thing every time.
Yeah, 5 things. Where he was talking about the bill that was proposed in Arizona or somewhere, where they were going to take away public funding from colleges that allow social justice courses to take place. And I didn't hear the free speech warriors going mad about that.
Yeah.
Who'd have thunk it? They're just totally full of shit, it seems. Anyway, sorry, yeah, go on. You were saying, sorry for interrupting.
But this is something, we can be a community, and we're happy to be a community. Because communities, to me, are how we support individuals to be the best that they can be, and good individuals make a great community. So it's sort of a what is the opposite of the vicious cycle, the sort of positive cycle, whatever.
Virtuous circle.
Right, it's a virtuous circle that we try to do. So I feel like we have a lot of ability to sort of come together, organize together, and be strong together. And that was one of the major things that I took away. Because I do think that we feel lonely a lot of times, because we get kind of gaslighted. Even I came home to being told that there were no feminists. Nobody is a feminist anymore. Like I just left 1 million people. So thank you for anonymous Twitter guy for telling me.
Now live, Chrissy, you've got to bear in mind, we now live in the age of alternative facts, where you can just make up any old shite you like and call it truth.
Yeah, apparently so.
If it's good enough for the president, it's good enough for everyone, surely.
And yet I have this problem with it. But yeah, so, and I was also told on Twitter by people, well, that didn't work. What are you guys going to do now? Like, what do you mean? I was just there. What do you mean it didn't work? Like, what did you think they were magically going to, you know, Trump was going to be lifted into heaven? Do you think that's what we were trying to do? That's crazy. You know, I mean, it worked. It created a bond, and it showed to each other, it showed to the world that we're all out here and we are a community and we do care about each other. We do care about Muslims. We do care about trans people. We do care about LGBTQ. Even though, you know, I may not be a Muslim, that doesn't mean that I'm just like, oh, well, fuck them. You know, I still care about my fellow human beings, all of them. So
can we talk? Oh, sorry. When we're done, when Chrissy's done, can we talk a little bit about attempts to delegitimize the march and what it stood for? Because I think it's worth unpacking that a little bit. But
Absolutely,
I don't. Go ahead, finish. Yeah.
If anyone's got any side tracks they want to go down, by all means. This is my channel is not regimented. It's like freeform jazz. Just go for it.
No, I think there was a lot of that, and I do think of it as gaslighting. But I know that Christy had some experiences too, so you could just sort of jump in and talk about some of the people that you got to have conversations with that I did note.
Well, it was just since, you know, coming back from the march and going on social media, it was, you know, I guess it shouldn't have been surprising, but it was perhaps depressingly predictable that people who claim that their biggest emphasis is freedom of expression and free speech would immediately try to delegitimize the free expression of all these people. So there were mocking attempts saying, oh, well, why didn't you vote? Well, the fact is that Clinton got 3 million, almost 3 million more votes than Trump did. He came in second in the popular vote. So we are the majority. We're not the minority. People did vote. We need more people to vote next time. And I think people have seen the consequences of not voting, both in the Brexit vote and in the Trump election. And I hope that they won't make the same mistake again. So we'll see higher turnout from people who oppose these kinds of policies. But saying, why didn't you vote last month makes a lot of assumptions and, again, tries to delegitimize what was really going on that day, what was an attempt to unify after an electoral loss, and asking each other, you know, how can we connect to move forward? There was also a really aggressive attempt on Twitter, from what I saw, to try to delegitimize the protests by calling them violent. And when I've asked people, show me the arrests on the day of the Women's March, they'll give me links to the protests that happened on the inauguration day. Well, you know what? Friday is not Saturday. So you can't delegitimize what happened. I don't know if you can't tell they can't tell dates. They don't understand the difference between Friday and Saturday. But you can't say that something happened on Friday delegitimizes what happened on Saturday when, from my understanding, I've seen the coverage, there were no arrests in DC, there were no arrests in Los Angeles.
Christy, they're using an alternative calendar. It's fine.
Right,
it's the
yes.
same day, different day, who cares? Next week, whatever.
And people, again, who are supposed advocates of freedom of speech should be celebrating. You don't have to agree with somebody's speech to agree with their right to do it. And yet they actually want to try to say that we don't have legitimacy to say these things, that our freedom of speech, we should just shut up and go home and not speak. How can you be both for defending free expression and then condemning people and trying to bully them into silence and delegitimize their speech? You can't, well, you do it, but you're a freaking hypocrite. So yeah, the attempts to delegitimize the march in many ways, I think, shows to me that the people on the right were as surprised as we were by the size of it, and that they're intimidated. That they find the idea that this number, like Steve was saying, there was no comparable Tea Party size rally. And so the first thing that they try to do, of course, is to try to minimize it, belittle it, and reduce it to nothing, when it's actually, as Steve was saying and has been reported, the largest global day of activism, maybe in human history.
Yeah, touching upon your brief allusion there to the free speech warriors again, I had a slight tete-a-tete with I think a person we've all had run-ins in with, Saga of a Cad on Twitter. He was saying that The election of Trump, that's democracy, but this is not democracy. And I have to point out, your understanding of democracy is fucking laughably childish. What, it begins and ends at the ballot box? What kind of moron are you? That's how you end up with a really shit backward country. If all you do is just put your X in a box every 4 or 5 years, whatever. It's ridiculous.
And it ignores the fact that the table is tilted against Democrats by Republicans. You know, there was voter suppression efforts in Wisconsin that were the margin of difference in Trump's victory. We've seen in North Carolina, Republicans redistricting to the point where, I mean, basically, I can't think of a single redistricting plan by Republicans that has not been struck down as constitutional. They are constantly attacking the concept of one person, one vote. So if you combine the fact that they gerrymander the lines in such a way, like Alabama, I think was just struck down as unconstitutional. Their attempts to maintain a Republican supermajority in order to deny proper representation. I mean, Sargon is an uneducated fool. Let's face it. He's a propagandist. He's not an informed person. He has no idea what he's talking about. He's an idiot. I've shown that in our debates. And he does no research. So he has no idea what he's talking about. Nobody should listen to him about American politics because he's a fool. So discard what he has to say.
Can I just add, all British politics?
And British politics, yeah.
And
so,
he lives
Sargon,
here. You really ought to know something about that at least. But.
Can I jump in too as well? Because and
no,
Kevin,
women are not allowed to speak on my stream. No, you may not.
Kevin. Also, I think you need to mute yourself a little bit because I keep hearing an echo when other people are talking.
Oh, for God's sake. Some people, come on.
I mean, I personally think that hearing what I have to say twice is a great thing, but but one of the very first things on the first day, and you know, the Trump administration had done, it's a little complicated. I don't want to go into the whole thing, but there was in Texas, there has been some ongoing things about voting rights and talking about how certain things are racist. You know, they are racist in effect. They are racist in just, you know, harming citizens who are people of color, who are eligible to vote, who cannot vote because of these like various restrictions and laws that they've put into place. And it's a very racist system. Now, there was sort of an argument about whether or not it was intentionally racist or just happened to be completely racist by wonderful coincidence. Who would have guessed? But in any event, so this has been going on. And one of the first, and the Justice Department has been working with the people saying, no, we want to get rid of this law because it is racist. You know, regardless of who planned it, wanted it, didn't want it, who cares? It's, you know, racist laws that keep American citizens from voting based on the color of their skin should be just shut down, right? And one of the first things that they did is they put in these sort of legal briefings to slow down that process. You know, sending little notes like, well, I know you were supposed to get together and figure this out on Monday, but we've got a new administration now and some things are going to change. So we're going to postpone it, you know? So that was one, I mean, this is a first day activity of our president. So don't tell me that this is all about democracy, you know? And I've been telling people all day, this president works for me now. I'm his boss, you know, and I find him to be a subpar public servant. And I am not going to shut up about that. He needs to answer to me as an American citizen and to people even in the world.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's worth stressing that point. He's not in power, he is in office. He is your employee, not your master. He is there to serve, not to rule.
You know, I want to mention something that sort of ties in with something that Chrisiousity brought up a few times already, with the idea of gaslighting, and to tie it in with what what do we think maybe will change as a result of the Women's March? Hopefully it will make the kind of gaslighting that Trump and Trump's cronies and Trump's apologists on the internet try to do. It'll make it a lot more difficult to get away with, because gaslighting is a huge proportion of what they do. You know, where it's the like the so-called press conference, the so-called press briefing that they had the other day, where where Sean Spicer tried to tell people that what they saw with their own eyes was not what they saw. You know, it's who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? You know, we can see photographs of the sparse crowd at the inauguration, but we're told, oh, those don't represent reality. Here, listen to me, and I'll tell you what it really was. You know, and the version of that online would be, you know, when people try to deny objective, inarguable statistical facts like the existence of a gender wage gap, and it's like, who are you going to believe, me or the World Economic Forum? You know, who are you going to believe, me, some racist dipshit who bullies people and pushes rape apologetics on YouTube, or the Department of Labor, you know, or the United Nations, or every major economic body in the world that has studied the subject and come to the conclusion that there is a gender wage gap?
Steve, what does the World Trade Organization really know about employment? Come on.
Exactly. Exactly. Some uneducated asshole with a YouTube channel and a clear axe to grind is obviously a much better source for information on this than professional economists who have studied the issue for years.
But it was written on Breitbart and Infowars. So I mean,
then I retract my statement. But you know, like, hopefully this will make it harder and harder to get away with, where they can say, oh, you know, nobody's really a feminist. That's no longer relevant. They're talking about issues that don't exist anymore. That's all in the past. You know, they can say that, but it'll be harder and harder to convince more people, because, hey, there's 500,000 people standing in the streets of Washington, D.C. There's 750,000 people standing in the streets of Los Angeles. There's 500,000 in Chicago. There's 500,000 in New York. There's 100,000 in London. There are huge crowds in Sydney, in Nairobi, in Rio de Janeiro. Mentioned
there were hundreds and hundreds of people in Fairbanks, Alaska, in Alaska. Minus 16 degrees. Fucking hell. What,
I mean,
that's madness. You have to be a real prick to get people to go out in minus 16 degrees. Fucking hell.
So and in addition to that, there's also what we already had, which is the popular vote total, which proves that at least in the case of Trump, he does not represent a majority. He does not represent the wishes and the beliefs of most people. He's the most unpopular incoming president since we started polling for that kind of thing. And it's just this stock and trade of theirs, which is to just flat out deny reality and to tell you that things are false, which you can prove are true, is just going to get harder and harder to get away with. And that hopefully will be one of the sort of side effects of this, in addition to the direct activism and the political action, just emboldening people when you talk about it in groups, when you hear someone bring up something, you know, in your presence, you can have the confidence to contradict it and say, actually, that's not true. You know, when you're online and somebody starts leaving shitty comments on your video or tweeting at you saying, you know, just bullshit like feminism is cancer, the wage gap doesn't exist, you know, racism is no longer a problem, blah, blah, blah. You can feel a little more emboldened and say, you know what, this is just a clucking chicken over here. This person has no power and has no mandate, has no facts on his side. I said his because, let's face it, it's probably a he. It might be a she, but it's probably a he who's saying it. And hopefully the tide will turn against that sort of thing, because again, we have the numbers, both in terms of statistics and facts and in terms of just people. You know, we are the majority. We have the truth on our side. We can prove it. And now we just need to go about doing it.
Hear, hear.
Can I, and I haven't really sort of formulated my thinking, but one of the things, because there were a lot of men there, and there were a lot of trans people, trans men and trans women there that I saw. So I'm not trying to be cisnormative, and I'm not trying to be, you know, put one gender over another, but I thought it was very important that this was a women's march that had a lot of men there saying, no, we stand with the women that we love and the women that are in our communities, and we stand beside them. You know, we don't need to be in front. We don't need to always, it doesn't always have to be about us. We are just as happy to be with women as, you know, because that's the thing. I mean, it's so the opposite of all the what about the men's that I hear probably every day. So to me, that was very affirming to me personally. And so I just,
as a man, if I could just interrupt you as a woman and tell you that
please do.
Actually, it was no, but to make a genuinely serious point, given the hyper manly man thing, which is obviously masking ridiculous thin-skinnedness of the current American regime, the fact that women are taking the lead in opposing that, I think, is only fair and correct, frankly, because I think men are doing a perfectly good job of fucking everything up right now.
One of the posters, I actually saw the handmade version of this throughout, throughout the march, was a man who would be holding a sign that just says "I'm with her" and then arrows pointing in every direction. And
yeah, I saw those too.
Those were just really, again, it's like, you're an awesome ally. It's nice to know that other people have my back on this issue, on these issues, and in turn, I'm going to have your back on your issues. And so it doesn't have to be, we have to talk about men's issues to the exclusion of women's issues. Or as feminists, we're not saying we have to talk about women's issues, however broadly we define women, hopefully as broadly as possible, to the exclusion of men's issues. What we're saying is, when it's time to talk about your issues, let's all talk about your issues and see how we can support you. And then when it's time to talk about the things that affect me or I care about, let's give me the time to express myself and to work on the issues that I care about. So, one of the other things that anti-feminists do is make everything a zero-sum game. They always try to pit the sexes against each other, rather than trying to find ways for men and women and trans people and migrant people and citizens and people who are able-bodied and people who are disabled and people from all different backgrounds. How can we work together? And I think that's what gives us our strength.
Christy, can I just interrupt you there? You've gone robotic.
I'll drop out and come back. I have this problem at the place where I'm staying.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, but your voice was a little bit difficult to understand. No worries. Yeah, what we're going to say, I've totally forgotten now. But yeah. Anyway, if either of you were about to say something, you can.
Well, I would just
distracted, and then
you were distracted by Robo Christie.
Yeah,
I would just jump in and say that I would, as a man, I would much rather. If I had to choose other men to have my back on something, I would much rather choose any number of random men from that crowd on Saturday than any of the pants-pissing anti-feminist crybabies on the internet, or now I have to say, or in the White House. I think men who care about equality and care about justice and care about having a free society where everybody has equal opportunities and is treated with a baseline of respect and dignity. The only place that we belong when women are fighting for their rights is behind them, supporting them. There's no other place for us. That's where we should be if we care about these issues. And it's the same thing if you want to be an ally to people of color and you're a white person. That's where you belong. You belong in that fight, supporting them, whether it directly affects you or not, because ultimately it does affect you. We all live in the same society. If there's another sign that I saw over and over and over again at the rally, which carried that beautiful quote, an injustice against one is an injustice against all. It all comes back to us eventually. If we want to have a society where everybody is free and everybody is treated with equality and dignity, then when women rise up and fight for their rights, we have to fight with them. That's the only way. And if you stand against that tells me who you are. If you're, that's why people, I get so amused and also simultaneously angered when people, they bridle at the term anti-feminist when I talk about anti-feminist, and I talk about them in very harsh terms and very, very condemning terms. They say, oh, what's wrong with being an anti-feminist? Or they say, well, just because I'm an anti-feminist doesn't mean I'm a misogynist or doesn't mean I'm a rape apologist. Please don't ask me to speak kindly about anti-feminists, because when I say anti-feminist, I don't mean someone who is a critic of feminism, who is trying to be constructive, who is taking part in a conversation. Because most of those people are actually, all of those people are feminists. Feminists argue with each other all the time.
I was about to say, as the 3 or 4 feminists in this room, we've all had things to say about elements of feminism we dislike, and that we you know, the best criticisms I've ever heard of feminism has come from other feminists. It's never come from an anti-feminist in my fucking life. Yeah,
and that's another gaslighting technique, trying to act like, oh, feminism is above criticism. No, asshole. But if you're going to be an anti-feminist, that is, you are going to stand against feminism in general. You're going to undermine the very things that feminism is fighting for and fighting against, and try to tell people that those aren't really problems. Then to hell with you. I don't owe you respect, and I'm not going to give you any respect. If you're an anti-feminist, as far as I'm concerned, you can go to hell. And I'm not going to be nice to you. And I'm not going to say, well, you're an anti-feminist, but I'm not going to go so far as to call you a misogynist. Or I'm you know, to hell with you. To hell with you.
Yes. Well, to draw a tenuous connection between this and another topic I wanted to talk about, the normalization of extreme opinion. How do we feel about A, the punching of Nazis, and B, the apologies that people make in general for, they're called the alternative right, but let's call them what they are, neo-Nazi scum. Any thoughts, either of you?
Chris, you can go ahead if you want.
I've stopped talking now, so someone else has to.
All right, so as far as punching a Nazi, we should not, there are laws, that was a criminal act. So that's all I really am going to say about that. It was against the law to do that. But as far as normalizing these horrendous ideas, these horrendous concepts, that have caused so much death, so much pain, so much suffering, so much human devastation and war and genocide, to turn around and say, oh, but we want to be heard, and we want you to just sit there and listen and talk to us about this, like as if we were discussing, you know, the price of bread. No, fuck off. It's not normal. It is not okay. There is nothing on this planet that has caused more devastation that I'm aware of than these kinds of racist, sexist, just anti-human ideas. When you start taking groups of people, just whole groups of people, and acting like they're not equally human, that there's nowhere that leads but violence and death and suffering and pain. And it has happened over and over again. It is not, and that's just it, period. And so it's not acceptable. You know, I may not go and punch anybody over it if all they're doing is talking about Pepe the fucking Frog, because fuck off, you assholes. Why would you think I would want to listen to you talk about Pepe the Frog anyway? But
it's just a cute little frog. What have you got against a frog? It's just a nice little frog that's hiding, you know, white nationalism and ethno-genocide. What's wrong with that? Come on now, people.
Yeah.
So we used a serious point there, because I think you've come to the wrong channel, Frank.
Yeah, I forget what the point I was making now, but the point is, it can't be normal. It cannot be normalized, because we know better now. There is a point where you have examined these same ideas over and over again, and as human beings together, we have said, fuck these ideas. They do nothing for us but create horror and devastation in their path. Fuck them. They are the worst ideas that we've ever had. We keep having them. We need to stop having them, and we need to stop acting like they're just, you know, a run-of-the-mill opinion that one might have.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I don't know about the worst idea, because putting pineapple on pizza, that's a pretty bad idea. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna. I'll let future historians decide which one's actually worse. But you know, Steve.
You know, I just want to. I'll piggyback on what Chris just said. I mean, there is a lot of people, and including a very disappointing number of so-called skeptics, who are trying to make it like, well, you can't just go around punching people because you disagree with them. And that is not remotely the issue. It's not a matter of disagreement. It's not, well, I think I'm more of a Plato guy and I'm more of an Aristotle guy. It's, I think white people are genetically superior and I'm totally okay with subjugating or maybe even wiping out people of color. Like that's the kind of, those are the ideologies that Richard Spencer pushes. Those are the kinds of things that he publishes in his newsletters and on his websites. That's who he is. He's a white supremacist. He's a white nationalist. He's a neo-Nazi. He promotes an incredibly harmful, dangerous ideology. That's who that guy is. And what look, as a general rule, punching people on the street is bad. I am anti-punching people as a rule. And yeah, as Chris pointed out, it's illegal and it should be. And if you punch somebody on the street and you get caught, you should be charged with a crime. That's the way it goes. But am I going to shed a single tear over Richard Spencer being punched? Absolutely not. Am I going to waste an ounce of breath wringing my hands or expressing any sort of annoyance or concern over Richard Spencer being punched? Absolutely not. The truth is, if somebody had run him over with a lawnmower, I wouldn't have cared, because he's a piece of shit. And while I do not recommend violence against people, if shitty things happen to shitty people, you know what I usually say? Well, good, fuck him.
All I can say then, Steve, is you were going to Washington. Why didn't you take your fucking lawnmower with you?
I know. I should have just strapped it on my back. I said I wouldn't do it.
Oh, okay. All right. That would have been really fun. You driving into Washington, D.C. in a lawnmower. That'd be amazing.
Where's Richard Spencer?
The weirdest hillbilly murderer ever.
Yeah. Why didn't someone stop him? He was going so slow.
Exactly. He was going at 3 miles an hour. Why didn't he just step out of the way? He was foolish to stand there.
It was, yeah, he had it coming. He could have gotten out of the way. But yeah, I mean,
let's not do victim blaming on lawnmower murder. That's not a direction I thought this conversation was going to go.
Let's not victim blame the Nazi who got ran over by a lawnmower in Steve's deranged fantasy.
That reminds me of that scene from I forget what film it is, where the concrete flattened machines going really slowly and the guards going, no!
Oh, yeah, Austin Powers. Yeah.
And then gets run over. Yeah. Anyway, so, Christy, in your absence, we moved on to...
punching Nazis?
Well, you can call it punching Nazis, but it seems like we live in a world where the neo-Nazis call themselves the alternative right, where the Trump's lies are called alternative facts. Let's just call it an alternative high five that Richard Spencer got.
Well, I think I'd probably echo the sentiments of other people here. There's a two-step process in these events. So there is my moral position on violence when it comes to politics, and whether that's, punching a fascist or, there's a famous, for those of you who study British politics, there's a famous back and forth where when Labour was running for election, a protester threw an egg at an MP, John Prescott, and he paused for a second.
The Deputy Prime Minister, no less.
Right. Was he Deputy Prime Minister at the time it happened?
It was indeed, yes. The 2001 election. So it would have been, for the last 4 or 5 years. Sorry, go on, yeah.
And his reaction was to just plow into the crowd and punch the guy in the face. So, one could say that was self-defense. But so there's a two-step process here. One is the act of violence, and two is an act of empathy. Right? So I have no problem morally and legally saying that I don't condone violence, because a cycle of violence will not help, and it won't promote your causes, and it won't win people over to your side. Am I required then to extend my empathy to people who spout hate and who basically do verbally, physical, sort of assaulting people verbally and incite others to perhaps engage in violent acts? No, I have no moral obligation. I have a moral obligation to stand up to violence, or to oppose violence as a form of political, as a political solution, right? Because I wouldn't want that done to me. But, you know, I have no doubt that if someone made a video where I got punched in the face, there was not a single anti-feminist on YouTube who would not be laughing their ass off and extending me no empathy whatsoever. So I have no moral obligation to defend, to empathize with that person, and to cry for him, as Steve said, or to make an hour-long video on that one issue. You know what? Because they haven't earned my empathy. And I would have more empathy for a stranger that I didn't know their views than someone who has gone out and made themselves the face of racism and fascism.
Understand, if there's something I could just throw in, understand how violent fascism is. It is inherently violent. So we're not talking about, there's a degree to which we are actually talking about self-defense here. A fascist idea, not
Kevin, can you mute
will
yourself
kill
again?
you. Hello, Rory. Kitty, kitty, kitty.
Sorry. Yeah, I can.
Yeah, so on the point of that.
Yeah. So fascism is not a normal political opinion. It is a violent one. It is inherently violent. It is a practice of violence against people. So don't pretend that we're just talking about, you know, somebody who thinks that taxes are bad, you know, or wants smaller government. No, we're talking, and, you know, I know that we're sort of combining anti-feminism and alt-right, and there's, you know, this family tree of right-wing ideas is so complicated, and I'm not trying to just make everybody the same.
A Venn diagram of.
Yeah, like it would just go on, like just colors and bubbles, but I am aware that anti-feminism and the alt-right, while they certainly have a lot of overlapping magisteria, they're not exactly the same thing. But in any case, I'm not crying over violent people who get punched. It's wrong to me. I do not advocate.
I might take a slightly more hardline stance on this than possibly some of the others in the room. Whilst, yeah, I don't think casual random acts of violence against average people is fine. Like, obviously that's illegal and should be illegal. But I think a point that Christy sort of alluded to there, that this for me is anti-fascist, not just self-defense, but defense of your fellow countrymen, women, and non-binary folk, because these people don't mean to, as you say, it's not about whether it's lower taxes or a slightly larger military or a slightly larger social safety net or whatever, because I'll just give you one particular quote from the delightful Mr. Spencer. He goes, however, for too long now, when we consider questions of race, especially questions considering the black race, we have been framing things in completely the wrong way. Instead of asking how we can make reparations for slavery, colonialism, and apartheid, or how we can equalize academic scores and incomes, we should instead be asking questions like, does human civilization actually need the black race? Is black genocide right? And if it is, what would be the best and easiest way to dispose of them? Unquote. That is not a man with whom you can have a reasoned conversation. That is not a man with whom you can negotiate some sort of halfway ground. That is a fascist piece of shit that means harm to people, to innocent people. And so if occasionally you have to clump one of them around the fucking head to make them know that they're not going to be unopposed, frankly, not only am I not going to lose any sleep over it, I put it on my fucking channel because I think it needs to be shown to the world that these people are not going to be unopposed. We've seen, show me in the history books where Hitler was defeated by an online petition and I'll change my view. But until, I don't think you're going to be able to do that. Sometimes you have to be violent with people who mean nothing but violence. They have, to misquote JFK, those that make peace impossible make violence inevitable. And I think they make violence inevitable.
If I could jump in as an American in Europe, one of the things that I've noticed is a difference in the acceptance of violence towards fascism amongst people in Europe. Sorry, Kevin, I can hear myself. Can I have you mute?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, I keep forgetting.
Yeah,
Apologies.
Yeah, that's all right. I think it's important that Americans who want to just knee-jerk condemn people in Europe who are more tolerant of an aggressive approach to fascists to reflect on the fact that they were not occupied by fascists. There were not fascist movements that were credible or supported by newspapers in the United States during the Second World War. And people in Germany, people in England, people in France, people in Poland had to, we have people in our, people's grandparents lived under fascist regimes in Italy, in Spain. And so fascism was a presence in Europe. It was an oppressive and violent occupation of many countries. And so I think it's a little bit unfair for Americans to get on our high horse and say, we have to be entirely nonviolent and to be very judgy of Europeans who are willing, who have Kevin's position. Now, I might differ with Kevin, but I'm not going to tell him he's wrong, because you know what? I didn't have the threat. My grandparents didn't have to go into the bomb shelters when the Nazis were flying over. I don't have people who served on the front. I think my family, the nearest relation I have, were serving in Korea. I don't know that people in my family served in the Second World War, but this is a living memory for Europeans, and I think it's important that Americans think about that and reflect on that. Again, it doesn't mean that you have to agree with it, but you have to realize that you have a privilege as an American, that you never fought against a fascist government to get your rights back. And so that's something I think that's worth saying.
And you don't even necessarily have to go back even to grandparents or great-grandparents for that. My father grew up in Birmingham in England, and they had a thing called bomb pegs, which is basically cities, entire cities basically were flattened, or entire sections of cities were flattened by the Luftwaffe. And they essentially flattened it out and made it into rubble wasteland. And they were called bomb pegs, and you'd have kids playing football on it and stuff. And it was literally people's houses that had been knocked down because they'd been bombed to death. And that was even into the 60s and even early 70s before those places were rebuilt. And even within my lifetime, our city centre is all virtually brand new buildings, like 1960s built buildings, other than the ones that were built in the last 10 years. They've had something of a renovation. And that was because the city centre, because we had lots of industry, was bombed to fuck. There's virtually not a building standing that wasn't bombed during the war. And so that's where fascism leads you. And I perfectly well understand, and I would reciprocate your understanding as an American towards the European perspective. I would reciprocate that in return and say, yeah, I think anti-violence is a perfectly legitimate thing. I'm not a pacifist myself, but if anyone is a pacifist out there, I've got no problem with you. I think that's a perfectly ethical situation, or stance to take. I just don't think it's practical given some of the things we've learned from history.
Well, and I feel like, again, we have to draw a distinction between, and Christy touched on this earlier, between advocating for violence and not giving a shit if horrible people have horrible things happen to them. Like I would not encourage people, just me personally, I would not encourage people to go out into the streets and start punching Nazis. Punching people is illegal, and it should be. But at the same time, if I open my newspaper and I read Nazi got punched last night, I'm going to say, oh, good. That's what I'm going to say, because fuck him. If I read the newspaper next week and the story is, oh, Richard Spencer is afraid to leave his house because every time he steps out his front door, somebody punches him, I'm going to say, good. Fuck him. He's not innocent.
Yeah,
he's not just some. Yeah.
So no, I'm just going to say that's actually a good point, because he's already come out with a statement saying he's unsure of his safety in public now.
Good.
And he should be.
Yeah,
exactly. These people should know that they're not just going to be able to spout this shit unopposed.
He's not. Yeah, he's. And I get, again, to follow up on what Christy said. If you tell me just that some random person got punched in the street when they were standing there talking to a reporter, and it's just an average generic person, I'll say, oh, that's too bad. Because in general, I'm against that sort of thing. If you tell me that a neo-Nazi got punched, I'm going to say, oh, good. Because that's the way it works. If something shitty happens to a shitty person, I'm not going to pretend that they're not a shitty person and say, oh, that's too bad. It's so sad that happened. I'm going to say, good. Something shitty happened to a shitty person. And I also want to point out, we're not just talking about violent opposition. The whole notion that we should just be arguing people out of their fascism or their white supremacy or their white nationalism, but we should just be having conversations about this, and that's the way we defeat them. People, I guess, have forgotten the Ku Klux Klan in the United States was not crushed by people arguing Klansmen out of their white supremacy. It was crushed because the Southern Poverty Law Center sued the largest Klan organization and took everything they had. That's what smashed the Klan. And that wasn't violent. And it's good that it wasn't violent, but it was opposition. It wasn't just, let's sit down at a table and discuss our differences. It was, these people are doing something awful and violent and destructive to our society, and we're going to use the tools at our disposal to deprive them of their ability to operate. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, it is necessary. If someone is pushing a violent ideology that says that people of color are less deserving of rights, are less deserving of life than white people, then that group and the people that spout that ideology have forfeited their right to be treated with respect in a civilized society. You know, Karl Popper said, he described it as the paradox of tolerance. If you want to have a tolerant society, the one thing you cannot tolerate is intolerance. Because if you tolerate intolerance, then eventually the intolerant will take power and overpower the tolerant. And in the name of tolerance, you will have enabled an intolerant society. They have to be stood against.
Yeah, a couple of points on that. Firstly, a sort of rhetorical point, sort of serious, sort of joking. There's something fascinating and brilliant about the way the American society and American government is structured, that you could even take on an organization like the KKK peacefully and eventually overcome it. Because when we had shit like that in Europe, we just started the two most destructive wars in the history of mankind. That's what we did. That was how we solved our fucking racism problem. And you're welcome, world. You're welcome. It's fine. And secondly, the linking I gave to this about the normalization of it, I think it's a point worth reiterating. When you say in any way that maybe I'm not terribly against the idea of Nazis getting punched, you have people come out and say, oh, so you're for the attacking of anyone with a disagreement. No. Just a conservative or even a libertarian or even someone on the relatively hard right, I'm not going to call for you to be attacked. I'll happily take you on, in an argument and try and win the day that way. But if you don't mean me harm and you don't mean people harm in general, then I don't call for you to be harmed. But if you call for people, like I take you back to the Spencer's quote about is black genocide right? I'm sorry, anyone who asks that question is not just someone with a disagreement. This is someone who is as big, well, actually, I would argue a bigger threat than Al-Qaeda, because frankly, Al-Qaeda didn't have any chance of ever taking over America. This man has the likes of Steve Bannon, who has the ear of the president now. These people are a genuine fucking threat to American life and therefore to the entirety of Western culture.
Yeah,
they're more dangerous than Al-Qaeda ever could dream of being.
If Richard Spencer gets his way, people die. That's it. Children will be harmed and killed, and people will be deprived of their rights if he gets his way. And if it starts to get to that point, then I think violence is, if that's what's open to you, that's the door you have to take. So when I say let's not take that door, it's only because I think that there are other doors available. But there comes to be a certain point where if that's what it's going to take to stop a man like this with ideas like this that could cause real harm, then that's what you would have to do. Morally, ethically, I don't see any other option.
And can I also just jump in about this, the tactics of the alt-right or the alternative right, whatever, the new right, because there's some internal divisions. There's a Business Insider article just published, very interesting. But I received yesterday, it's from a Barron fan, who said to me that if I don't go on air and say X, they're going to punch a feminist in the face. They're like basically blackmailing me, threatening violence on another person, a stranger, in order to leverage my fear or compassion protecting somebody from violence to say something on my channel. That is just, to me, beyond the pale. I mean, this, so it's really difficult, to have empathy, again, for the Richard Spencer types and those people who support him and defend him, when I'm seeing them blackmailing me in my comment section with violence if I don't speak the things that they want me to say.
Yeah,
what the fuck is going on?
Yeah, sorry, Christy, you've gone crackly robotic again. Apologies. I think we got the general point you were making though about that, yeah. And I would stretch it further to say that these people, the difference between them, and I don't give a fuck for the accusations of Godwin's law. Godwin can go fuck himself. The difference between these people and the Nazis is the Nazis had the opportunity to enact the very same policies that these people dream of enacting, and indeed openly talk of enacting in some cases. If Richard Spencer was serious about not being a Nazi, when he saw people giving the Nazi salute at his conference, would he have not said something? Would he have not come out and said, "Don't Sieg Heil, what are you doing Sieg Heil for? What the fuck? We're not Nazis." So actually, he's just saying, basically, we are Nazis. So let's not give them power. And if that means occasionally having, like I say, occasionally if one of them gets knocked down, I'm not going to cry any salt tears for them, because frankly, I think the civilized world is a better place for occasionally being uncivilized to the uncivilized.
And if I could even bring up, threats are a kind of violence, especially when they're used to silence people. And I'm getting very frustrated with people who I hear say things like, well, was it a credible threat? The only way you find out if a threat is truly credible is when you're dead. So yeah, pardon me if I'm going to that would be the test.
You have to wait until you're in the morgue to find out whether it's a credible threat. So I mean, until someone actually kills me, I don't have to take death threats seriously. Go fuck yourselves. Yeah. Sorry, go on, Krista.
Yeah, no, I'm very, very frustrated with that idea. I'm very frustrated with the idea that in a world where people do go on YouTube, make a manifesto video, and then go and shoot people, misogynists go out and just shoot people. Oh, but was this a credible threat? How the fuck would I know? I'll know when I'm bleeding to death from the bullet wounds. So no, that's not an acceptable question. Threats are wrong. You can't do them. They're always credible to some degree or another.
Yeah, I think your allusion there to the Isla Vista shootings, I think, is absolutely spot on. When you have people making the exact same points that Elliot Rodger made, with the exact same level of vitriol, and they go, well, is it really credible? Is it this, that, and the other? Well, I'm sorry, it only has to be credible once out of 100 times. It only has to be credible once out of a fucking million times. If they're making a million videos, who's to say they aren't the very next person who's going to go and do some shit like that? How about to misappropriate and actually use it correctly in a way that matters, to drain the swamp of hatred there? Why are we just going along as if this is normal behavior or this is acceptable fucking behavior under the guise of, oh, well, we've got a friendly little frog character at the front. Oh, memes are funny, aren't they? No, you're the same hateful pricks you always were.
Yeah, it's not normal. We on the internet have normalized a lot of things that just aren't fucking normal. It's not normal for grown men to go after teenage girls. It's fucking creepy. And it's fucking perverse. And it's fucking wrong. I don't care if you like their ideas or not. That is not okay. A 35-year-old man harassing verbally a teenage girl is a fucking creepy piece of shit. Period.
Well, not just that, but even if it's not the youth of the individual, but say, a popular anti-feminist YouTuber saying to a member of the British Parliament, "I wouldn't even rape you." Why is that acceptable? Why is that normal? Why is that just been accepted by his hundreds of thousands of subscribers as perfectly okay behavior? That's fucking madness.
Well, there's another point to this too, that that I've brought up, I think once or twice in videos before, and I know I've discussed it with people in private conversations. I think a lot of people on what I guess we could call the other side of this, the sort of anti-feminist, anti-social justice, pro-Nazi, which I think we have to say now, pro-Nazi side, or at least a Nazi water-carrying, Nazi apologist side. The people who are just so broke up about seeing a Nazi get punched.
If they're not Nazis, they do seem awfully fond of being friendly with them.
Yes, not a neo-Nazi, but an incredible simulation.
Yeah.
And I think with a lot of them, both the ones who actually have YouTube channels with large audiences and the ones who are followers of those, there's a vibe among a lot of them that this is all just like a game. They're just doing this for fun. And when they push these toxic viewpoints to their audiences, it's just for fun. They're just doing it for the views. They're just doing it, you know, it's just a game, and their followers pick this up. And I think a lot of them don't seem to understand that I genuinely don't like them. You know what I mean? Like when they attack my friends, when they attack my family, when they attack the basis of the society that I live in, and then they act like, oh, what's your problem? We just want to, why won't you debate with us? Why won't you have a conversation with us? I think you're garbage. I think you're garbage. If I saw you in the street, I would turn around and walk away from you. I would not engage you in conversation. Your opinion is irrelevant to me. I don't respect you. I don't owe you a second of my time. You're a piece of fucking garbage. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And it's not just because we disagree. It's not just because I like the Orioles and you like the Red Sox. All right. I actually kind of like the Red Sox too. But that's not the nature of our problem.
I knew I liked you. I knew I liked you for some reason.
I was so happy in 2004. But no, it's not that. It's not just, well, you just can't handle disagreement. If you push racism, if you push misogyny, if you push rape apology, if you push religious bigotry, if you vilify refugees, if you denigrate people with disabilities, if you denigrate trans people and gay people, if that's what you do for a living, especially, then to hell with you. It's not about disagreement. It's about you pushing harmful, toxic, in some cases, violent bullshit to people and then expecting to be respected by people who don't buy your bullshit. And if that's the demand you are making, my answer to you is fuck you, go to hell. You're not my friend, you're my enemy. And if you don't think I'm your enemy, you should. Because that's what I mean to be. I'm not interested in being your debate partner. I'm not interested in having a conversation with you. You're pushing toxic bullshit. If you want to argue about, you know, what economic policy is best, sure, let's have that argument. If you want to talk about what's the best way to combat climate change, absolutely, let's have that argument. If you want to argue whether or not God exists, let's have that argument. That would be fun. If you want to argue whether or not women deserve equal rights, fuck you. If you want to argue whether or not black folks deserve to live lives free of police brutality and systemic racism and brutalization, if you think that's a subject for argument, fuck you. Argue with somebody else. You're not going to argue with me about it. If you want to argue whether or not it's okay that somebody fucking punches a white supremacist in the face, if you want to tell me that I should feel bad about that, fuck you. You're wasting your time. You're wasting your time talking to me. Go talk to somebody else.
Steve, it's going to cost a fortune, but I want that engraved on my fucking tombstone, man.
The whole thing. But that's, exactly. I mean,
it's going to be a fucking huge one. It's going to be 10 feet tall, but it's going to
I can't stress. I mean, because I know, Kevin, you get it. I know Christy gets it. Chris gets it. A lot of us get it, where people leave these absolutely awful comments or send us these awful tweets or make videos about us, and they straw man us and they attack us and they mischaracterize us and they insult and denigrate us. And then they turn it around and say, why don't you want to have a conversation with us? I'm sorry. Fuck you. You forfeit your right to be treated with respect by me when you attack me, when you attack my family, when you attack my friends, and when you push intolerant bullshit that is based on lies and bigotry to your audiences. You forfeit the right. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think both as men, me and Steve can both attest to the absurdity of being told to go kill ourselves by people who claim that feminists don't care about the lives of men. What? Brilliant.
It's a little inconsistent. It's a little inconsistent.
Anyway,
but,
right. I think expounded upon. Unless there's anything else anyone else would say. Any closing thoughts, points?
Well, I do talk to people sometimes, and I don't mind having conversations with people, and I try very hard to be very specific about characterizing people. So just because, you know, and not everybody is like that, you know, it's
you're far too nice a human being, Chris. You're far too decent and pleasant for this world.
Well,
for the internet especially.
Yeah, well, for sure for that, but you know, I'm hoping it will catch on. Who knows? But there is a point, you know, I'm not going to talk to certain people about certain things, and I'm not gonna, you know, for instance, Bering, and who called me a liar and a man-hater or whatever. I'm not going to go have a conversation with him like we're buddies. You know, that's absurd. And one of the reasons, and I was explaining this in terms of some of the things that have gone on with Bering and drama recently. One of the reasons we can't tolerate it is because if we tolerate it, it makes it look, it hurts other people as well. Because then we've accepted it. We say, oh yes, you can lie about me, and I'll just this is fine, twiddly dee. No, it's not okay, because then you're going to keep doing it to this person, this person, this person, and this person. I mean, this is we've mentioned a few things like Karl Popper, but this is something like kind of like Kant. Do you know Immanuel Kant, who talked about
that kind of language on this channel, please? That's outrageous.
I will try. I can't help it. That bastard and his horrible name. But, you know, he sort of had said something, and I forget the actual words that, but he said, imagine if this was a universal rule and everybody treated people this way, you know, all around. If that sounds like hell on earth, don't fucking do it to one person. So that's sort of how I take it, you know, like, this isn't something that I can condone. I can't condone it when you're talking to me, and I can't condone it when you're talking to somebody else who's an innocent person who doesn't deserve it either. So that's it, you know.
Yeah, I think that echoes of the name of the famous poem of the first they came for the Jews, but I was not a Jew, so I didn't stand up. I think is perfect. I mean, it's such an brilliant, and it's not just talking about some abstract thing. Obviously he lived through the actual Nazis, and it's the same process taking place, only this time it's first they came for the Muslims, then they came for the gay folk, and then they came for the women, or whatever. You can't allow that domino to fall, even just on a basis of pure self-interest, because eventually they will fucking come for you. Anyway, sorry, go on. Yeah, Krista.
Yeah, so hopefully I'm on my phone now. I'm trying a different form of communication, so hopefully this will work out a bit better. But, you know, I think that my course of experience on YouTube, especially in light of this march, a lot of things, you know, kind of have crystallized for me in the last 6 months. I used to be very liberal in my channel in terms of allowing comments, and I increasingly could not do that because of the threats and the harassment and the abuse that kept appearing in my comments. And it finally dawned on me, you know, I guess, you know, it didn't take me very long being part of the feminist community, that I don't have interlocutors. We have propagandists. We have propagandists in the anti-feminist and the anti-justice. I'm not going to call it like social justice warrior, the anti-justice community, shall we say. And they aren't interested in dialogue. They're interested in propaganda. And to the extent that we are willing to engage with them, it's just grist for their propaganda mills. And so as a political campaigner, it's not my job to reason with propagandists. It's my job to provide a counter narrative. It's my job to provide an alternative based on facts and evidence and human compassion, and looking to unite people, not divide people, looking to bring people into equality, not asking people to put up with the inequality they already face so that that other person isn't made to feel uncomfortable. And so, yeah, my opinions on how to use my YouTube channel have been transformed by the attacks, by the harassment, by the lies, and by being the subject of propagandists who, use me and my ideas in order to twist them to line their pockets. And so, increasingly, I will not, I'm engaging sort of, less and less on a one-on-one, engaging more and more in just a general critique to tear down and debunk and undermine people who claim to be authority, like Carl, who talks about American politics as if he knows the first thing about it, and to not be, not feel like I'm somehow oppressing someone's freedom of speech, or somehow I'm not in favor of free speech. Speech is not, freedom of expression does not mean that propagandists, as chrisiousity said, can lie about you and attack you and harass you and have their friends blackmail you into making content, and then treat them with the respect and dignity that they refuse to show you. So I reserve my respect and dignity for people who are reasonable and who, they might not agree with me, but they're not going to include a slur in every comment that they leave. And I won't be apologizing for that anymore. I think on the left, one of our faults is that we are too noble, that we hold ourselves to a higher standard than they hold themselves. And I'm not going to fall to their level, but I'm also not going to tolerate it, and I'm not going to pretend like it's not gutter sewer attempts at propaganda anymore either. That's part of what I want to take forward, is our positive message and also exposing their propagandist messages.
Yeah, on the point of holding ourselves to a high moral standard, actually, a thing occurred to me. Someone asked, why didn't Hillary Clinton speak at the Women's March, which would be her sort of ballpark in a general sense. But obviously, after the inauguration of an election that, I mean, she got more votes, but technically she lost, sort of thing, I think it would be wrong and unseemly of her to campaign against the guy who's just taken office in that election. And a point occurred to me that actually, had it been the other way, especially given the fact that the other way would have been Donald Trump winning the popular vote but losing the Electoral College, you'd have never heard the last of it. His Twitter would have fucking exploded. But we hold ourselves to a high moral standard. So she attended as a former First Lady with Bill Clinton, obviously a former First President inauguration, as one should do in that situation, and did so with aplomb, even though I wouldn't have blamed her going up and just slugging the guy because he's a piece of shit.
You know that when
called her
she went up on stage,
and called her the biggest criminal ever to run for the office.
They started chanting "Lock her up." They started chanting "Lock her up" at the swearing in when she went on stage. That's how.
Well, are we surprised? I mean, the people that he attracts are fucking filth. And I'm not saying all the tens of millions that voted for him are. A lot of people are just sort of Republican voters or whatever. But the hardcore Trump fans are just human detritus. I mean, they really are turds. I don't wish to be dehumanizing in too broad a sense, but I mean, they're garbage.
All they have to do is change their minds. This is the difference. They see someone of African descent, and they see someone who is because of their skin color worth less than they are. Now, the reason I think that they're scum and I don't have empathy for them, it's not because of who they are in their essence, because I don't believe in essentialism. It's because they hold absolutely vile views that they choose to hold. And all they would have to do to get my respect back is to change their tactics, change their views, change their ways, and to just be a decent human being instead of a propagandist or an outright racist and fascist. So this isn't about some essential part of themselves that they can't change, a disability, their sex, their gender identity, anything like that. It's their opinion, that those are completely voluntary. They can question those at any time, Sorry to interrupt, Kevin.
Oh, yeah, go on, Christy, go on.
No. I just had a little bit of a rant there, so thanks for letting me get that out.
Oh, sorry. I thought someone was it Chrissy that was trying to interrupt?
And then, I turn this on ourselves too, as well. Don't tell me that turf is a slur. It's not. It's a description, and if it's an accurate one, then you are not. Then that's the word I'm going to use for you, because that is the idea that you hold to. That is the tactics that you employ, and it's not acceptable. It's not acceptable to me, and it's not acceptable to the ideals I hold or to the values I hold. If you don't like it, tough cookies. I don't know. I mean, what am I going to tell you? You should, but I don't like it that you don't accept. I mean, to me, who the fuck do you think you are telling a woman that she's not a woman because she doesn't have the plumbing that you think that she needs to have. You know, if being a woman is just about plumbing, there's no point. There's nothing that it is anyway. It's just nothing.
Yeah, well, I think someone summed it up nicely in a meme of all things about the TERFs. Their idea of feminism is fighting against rigid gender roles by enforcing rigid gender roles. But unless you've got a vagina, you're not worthy in some sense. Or like it's and again, it's sort of almost, it goes down the same line of thinking as the white supremacists, of an arbitrary factor of the way you were born dictates everything about you, which is bullshit, obviously.
And this is something to tie into the march. Yeah. As regards to the march, you know, it's not just, I mean, yes, our main focus is Trump's administration, the Republicans, but because, again, of our commitments to intersectionality and our respect for diversity, we, you know, should be promoting justice for all in equal access to education and opportunities and jobs without facing discrimination. And if that means that, you know, people who stand next to us also, you know, we need to talk to them too if they're expressing views that are bigoted, engage in those conversations. So it's a 360 activism. You know, it's obviously focused most on the people who have political power because they have the power to harm people's lives. You know, there could be, if people lose their health care or they're forced into high-risk pools where they can't afford their health insurance again after being on the American Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, and they suffer permanent health damage or they die, it was literally, these policies are life and death. So obviously that's where a lot of our attention is. But we all have to continue to question, you know, our assumptions, our patriarchal norms, and to question whether or not we're really working to the most just society we can live in or not.
Yeah, and not just that, but the appointment of judges that are going to potentially overturn Roe v. Wade as well. I mean, just really, really basic shit that should be a battle that's dead.
It's a legal medical procedure, and yet, yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's not going to stop any abortions happening. It's just going to stop safe abortions from happening.
That was a poster.
But yeah, I've made a decision also, by the way, Peter. I should have mentioned this at the beginning, because basically, if you're watching to the end here, there's probably about 4 fucking people that'll make it this far. But I'm going to be doing every week for the next 4 years, or however long this train crash of a presidency goes on. I'm going to be doing a weekly. I'm going to call it the Trump Dump, because I think that sums up exactly what I think of the man. Every Friday, because that will be the weekly anniversary of his inauguration, I'm going to be doing essentially a This Week in Orange type roundup thing, which will be fun and horrific, because it means I'll have to actually keep up with the news every week. And Christy has rather graciously said that she will collab with me on some of those, and possibly take over on weeks where maybe I'm ill, or if I die, possibly, who knows.
I got you back.
Yes, so there's that. So thank you for that. Steve, any final thoughts, and then I'll say goodbye to the people.
Well, I just want to say, I mean, Kevin, you've survived doing the Descent of Man-osphere for all these years, so I think you can handle having to dive into Trump every week. This is what you've trained for.
True, but I could always just look back and say, oh, well, these people don't matter. Whereas this bloke, unfortunately, does fucking matter. And that's really scary. It's like having Milo Yiannopoulos making national policy, which is terrifying.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's a distinction there.
Not to deflate any of the Americans watching either in the room or in the chat or anything later on, but yeah, your country is in bad shape. I mean, I would like to leave you on a positive note, but you are fucked at the minute.
No, we should remember that. But I want to bring it back to the positive note and just remind everybody of the fact that, again, as I said when we were talking about the Women's March, we've got this. You know, we need to do it. There's a lot of work to do, but we can do it. You know, the tide is turning. And we can see visible representations of our strength, of our numbers, of our confidence, and the people who are sort of throwing these little tantrums against us on YouTube channels. and who managed to squeak out a historically narrow electoral college victory in this election, despite their side losing the popular vote by nearly 3 million votes. They are fighting on the wrong side, and they're fighting against the turning tide of history. And all we need to do is remember that and do what we know we have to do. Get involved politically. Call our representatives. Donate to organizations. Organize. Speak out with the platforms we have. You know, be a voice to people in person in our social circles. You know, we can do this. We've got this. It's going to be a long road, but it's doable. And that's the note that I would like to leave us on today, is that, yes, we've talked about a lot of just toxic, awful bullshit in the second half of this conversation, and it needs to be talked about. But we also need to remember that we have got this. We can do this, and we need to go and get about doing it.
Exactly. I think that is a very positive note to end on, and also to remember that, again, these people are not your dictators; they are your employees. If you put enough pressure on them, they have to bend to your will. And as you say, it's not just talking to politicians, but a national dialogue means just that, a national dialogue. Just talking to people in your street, your next door neighbour, the guy in the fucking local convenience store, wherever, that's all a part of this. That's a huge part of this. That's how, I mean, we can't all be Nelson Mandela, but together we can, if that makes sense. So go on.
Yeah. Just want to recommend that people go and watch some of the speeches. If you look on YouTube, there are some of the speeches at from the Women's March on YouTube. And now where Steve and I were standing, sadly there was some audio problems, so I wasn't able to hear all of the speakers clearly. But one of the persons that I did hear, probably 75% of his actual talk, was Michael Moore. And I would strongly recommend, actually, Kevin, if you can link to it, he gave a summary of what you can do now, what you do after you leave the march. And it's not just for the marchers, it's for anybody who is watching. So, that's one for sure I can recommend. I'll go watch some of the other ones too. Like I said, our sound was a little bit dodgy, so we didn't always hear everything. But at least check out the Michael Moore speech. And if you feel down, if you feel disheartened, if you feel like you're Sisyphus and the ball is just rolled down the hill again, go watch that video. Or go watch Steve's video on the march, or watch something that inspires you, because that is what's going to keep us strong, and that's what's going to get us to the end.
Well, I will link to some of those below, because I watched the whole thing live on Facebook, and I'll dig out some of those and link those below at some point in the next day or two, because I'm going out getting drunk tonight. So it probably won't be tonight, but at some point I will go and do that. And of all the Greek mythological creatures, I thought someone would do a Narcissus line at some point, but no, we went with. Anyway, thank you enormously to Cece and to Christy and to Steve. Thank you for going on a genuinely, hopefully, history-changing and epoch-defining a genuine world event. I mean, that made fucking international news, and you were all there as a part of a huge thing, and thank you for that. And thank you for coming on to chat about this, and just thank you for generally being awesome. Their channels are linked below. Go and subscribe to them immediately, or Rory Katz will scratch the fuck out of you. He won't, he's asleep, but never mind. Yeah, so thank you for that. Thank you all for listening and watching. Links are below. Pip pip.